What if I told you there was a simple formula you could learn and master to overcome any objection in your sale? That's what we're going to cover today in Sales is Easy. My name is Devon Gall. I'm your friend and mentor in business marketing and sales, and I'm the best that ever presented this information. Let's get started. This is overcoming objections. The formula is 3 parts. Really, it's 5 parts, but 2 of the parts you don't do anything. All right? So the first part is stop. This is called the ARC method. All right? So you want to stop and listen. The customer has an objection. You've heard this objection 1,000 times, 10,000 times because you've been doing sales for a while. You already know what they're going to say and you already know the answer to it. But you want to stop and listen, maybe even tilt your head a little bit, let them know that you're listening. Then you want to acknowledge. All right, agree or acknowledge them with them. What this does, this creates empathy. You empathize with them. You let them know that they're being heard. All right, people want to be validated. Even when they're dead wrong, even when they know they're dead wrong, but they're just standing on that hill, you empathize with them and you let them, you acknowledge that that is a valid concern. Next, you want to relate. There's 2 ways to relate. You can relate through yourself or you can relate through others. But the best way to do it is to relate through others that have already bought. Because then you put this person in a bucket of a smart question asker, all right? They're a smart question asker. They're a person that is like other people that have bought that product or service from you, and they're asking the same questions that the buyers from the past have already asked you. So you relate to them. How this looks is, I totally hear what you're saying. Other people, I'm so glad you asked that because other people I've signed up have asked me that same question. Right? Then you want to close the deal. Close can mean a couple different things here. If we're at the end of the presentation, we're getting documents signed, we're getting contracts signed, we're getting personal information. If we're earlier in the deal, we're at the beginning of the presentation, we're closing them to keep moving forward within the deal. Right? Directly asking for their business. And then the last step is stop and wait. Whoever talks next is going to lose this battle. So sometimes you're going to have a 45-second, 30-second pause, sometimes over a minute, and you just smile, have good eye contact, have good energy, good open body language, and you just wait for them to respond because their little hamster wheel is spinning of why I should do this, or it's spinning of why I should not do this, and they're going to have another objection. So remember, whoever speaks next loses. So you got to put these stops in here because what happens is that awkward pause comes up after you close them. You say, oh, this is super simple. We can get you started today. And then you need to zip it. But what happens is then that silence is there. And then a mid-level salesperson or a new person, what they're going to do is they're going to try to fill that silence. And they usually try to fill that silence by going back with value add-ons and incentives and start talking about how great the deal is. But what you're doing is you're short-circuiting the customer's thought pattern. Now they're thinking about something else instead of signing up or not signing up or having another objection that they need to talk about. And you just ruined your deal, all right? So every single objection, you follow this little formula: stop, acknowledge, relate, close, stop, wait. And then if they have another objection, Just repeat it. It's a closing loop, all right? If you've been in sales for a while, you might have heard it called a couple different things. I've heard multiple ways of describing the exact same idea on YouTube and in sales in different offices, working with different groups of people. There's a lot of different ways to say the same thing. This is just the way I've learned it. This is the way I teach it. It's the ARC method. Next, we're going to recognize buying signs. When a person has an objection, you have to realize an objection is not a no. Trust me, people will tell you no. If they're not interested, they'll say, no, I'm not interested. An objection is the prospect envisioning themselves with your product or service. And they're thinking about what it would be like. So an objection is actually a buying sign. They're trying to figure out if this would be a good thing. It's not a no, so don't misread objections. A lot of people, objections sometimes they're quick, they're snappy, they're real kind of like sometimes aggressive objections. Your normal reaction would be like, oh, well, actually it's this, it's that. Just acknowledge them, say, oh, that, I'm so glad you asked that. I'm really glad you brought that up. And follow the method. So it's prospect, imagining themselves with the product, with the service. That's what an objection is. It's a buying sign. Next, we're going to just cover like the old school method of how this used to be taught. This is called I completely understand. How you feel. Other people I've signed up, they felt the same way. But what they found out was, it's the same method. You acknowledge them. I completely understand how you feel. That's acknowledgement. That's it. R, relate. That's felt. Other people I've signed up felt the same way. What they found out was, this is where your little rebuttal comes in for whatever specific objection they may have. But the problem is here, there's no close. Right? So you want to close your deal now. So that's why this method is kind of incomplete, because you're missing the closing part of the method here. So the problem comes when you're doing multiple objections that you're not going to sign up anybody with only one objection. Okay, maybe 1 in a million people have one objection and then sign, but the reality is they're going to have multiple objections. Okay, and you cannot just sit here and constantly say every objection, I completely understand how you feel. I completely understand how you feel. I completely understand how you feel. You're going to sound like a robot. You're going to sound like you're scripted. You need to, being good at sales is, you got to be natural. You got to be natural, right? So what you want to do is get real good at the implication of I completely understand how you feel. You can say basic things like, I see what you're saying. I hear what you're saying. That totally makes sense. Other people have asked that same question. Other people brought that same thing up, right? You're just saying, you're implying this, but you're not saying these exact words. You can say these exact words once, but you don't want to just keep saying them over and over and over, right? That's when you get really good at the loop, because it's just basic formula, right? You don't have to have like a 270 million questions you got to fucking ask to get through every single objection. It's the same thing every single time. They can ask, well, what about squirrels getting into the cables? Oh, I'm so glad you brought that up. Other people have actually asked that same thing, and what they found out was we have squirrel-proof technology, whatever it is, whatever your rebuttal is. There's literally any rebuttal they have or any objection they have. This is going to be able to get through it, no problem, and the right way. Now, the last part I'm going to put in here, and I really need to emphasize, remember your first 80-90% of your presentation, you're always closing the entire, from the very first moment you talk to someone till you get them to sign, you're closing throughout the deal, okay? So what I'm going to talk about next is only for like the last 5% of your deal, where you're actually closing and signing the contract and signing the deal, okay? So this is the last 10%. What you put right here between relate and between close is your incentives, or more specifically, one incentive at a time. You don't want to put all the incentives at once, right? Incentives create impulse. Incentives create urgency. Incentives create excitement. But if you're not ready to get them to sign, you shouldn't be wasting these things. These are your bullets. And you only got so many incentives, so you only got so much ammo. And if you spend all your ammo in the beginning part of the presentation and you, as they say, you drop your pants and give them everything before you start closing the deal or actually asking for the business to get them to sign up, you're not going to have any ammo left when you get at the very end of the presentation where it's time to sign the line. So save your incentives. Any kind of incentive before you're actually closing is a big no-no. You want to sell on value. So instead of in the beginning here, focus on value propositions, but save your incentives for the very end of the presentation when you can get them really excited and get them to actually sign up and you can get that paycheck. All right. Appreciate y'all coming down. Love y'all. Have a great rest of your day.